Welcome back, viewers. Still on the briefing on the current hearing at the TRRC with Alaji Martin giving his testimony. Al Hassan, we will be right to say that things are getting more interesting with regard to Alaji Martin's current testimony at the TRRC.
Well, exactly, and again, the interesting part come for Herek. We are seeing, I mean, the contradiction again from the first part and then this part. Initially, Alaji Martin did not accept the fact that the nylon bags were applied on Sana Sabali and then Sadibu Haidara. But on the second part, we've seen he at the end of that part, rather, sorry, he admitted that the nylon bag was used on Sana Sabali and Sadibu Haidara, which shows that he is not that consistent with the kind of testimony he is giving. Sometimes the council has to use certain, mechanisms to be able to get
I know, right?
these
But
nitty-gritties.
there's still a little sense of denial there because he's also denied that Sana Sabali was taken to the beach, of which Sana Sabali told the councils that he was allegedly taken to the beach and made to undergo waterboarding.
Yes, but basically we can just set the line that Alayi Martin is at a defensive point, unlike other witnesses who would come and accept. We can cite Sana Sabal as an example, who has been principal, order giver, should I say, who just came to the TRRC and took all the blame, and then it was so smooth for him, and we've seen how it turned out for him at the end of the day. We've seen a part where about 5 witnesses said Alaji Martin and his team used hammers and electrocution boxes to make tortures on these people. But again, he is very, very firm on the fact that those were just.
And another astonishing part is where he mentioned that he only visited the NIA to make tortures to beat Sana Sabali, rather, or investigate Sana Sabali's case on 2 occasions only. But then past testimonies have revealed that Alaji Martin has been to the Mile 2 for more than he claims. He also asked counsel to investigate by asking the prison officers there at the time if he has gone to the prisons for more than 2 times. But then this is where the current commissioner of Janjanbureh comes in, who was a health officer at the time when Sana Sabali and others were at the Mile 2, who said at that time no prison officer had was brave enough to stop any military or state guard officer from entering the prison, because it was like they owned it, in fact. So they didn't have to go through the right procedures before entering. So it might be a bit difficult to trace whether they've gone to the prisons for more than that or not, because it might be difficult to trace that on record.
And
Because from the past testimony, it's like these people actually have been going through the prison without going through the right procedure, which means their names might not be recorded.
Yeah, and then another point is we've seen where this guy Alaji Martin is saying the prison officers should be engaged to get more information as to whether they've meted certain tortures. For instance, the point where Sana Sabali said he was hanged, on the ceiling, and then something was inserted,
A metal, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he's saying that they should go and make a reference to the prison officers.
Yeah.
And as you were saying, that would just sound very contradictory because we've seen some prison officers who came to the TRRC to witness will tell you that these people were so powerful that they don't inform them what they're about to do. When they come, they will just give orders that we need to go to this place, and they just go and do whatever they want to do and leave. So I don't think it would make sense to hold to the fact that
exactly. And past testimonies have revealed that during tortures like that, no prison officer was around.
Exactly, but to be very frank on this, we've seen the situation of the lead counsel and Alaji Martin going over the comments. You would see where many people would even be like, the lead counsel in fact needs an energy drink to be able to get that energy to press Alaji Martin more.
Yeah, because you could actually sense the anger in Alaji Martin's voice. The anger is actually beginning to come out. And then if you have a bit experience about courtrooms and all, you would know that anger is the last thing you need when you are in contact with a counsel or a lawyer, because that is actually what they are in. It somehow gives way to the lawyers or the counsels.
Well, now we've seen the point where Alaji Martin insists that he only engaged Shana Sabari on 2 occasions, and after that, the rest of the case was taken up by the NIA. I mean, but we've also seen a very, I mean, huge a part of the discussion that deals with the panel at the NIA. We've seen witnesses like we've seen this guy Babu Jaha giving his own ordeal on how he was treated by Alaji Martin and co. We have this Musa Jame alias Malia Mungu and the others. But plainly, Alaji Martin is trying to say all those things did not actually happen or did not come from his side. And again, we've seen the role of the junglers. For the first time, we are seeing exactly how the junglers are being highlighted in terms of facilitating
Exactly.
the tortures and things like that, because you've clearly said that the junglers were responsible for arresting, I mean, bringing in the witnesses, taking them out if they are reluctant to surrender information or as they want it, that is to confess. They will take them, torture them, I mean, to a level where they will believe that when they come back to the panel, they will give out information as they want it, that is to force them to
Yeah,
confess.
Al Hassan, and that shows you how the past regime, twisted the law, and played it in their own way. Because under normal circumstances, we all know that the police is actually responsible for arresting people, no matter how huge a crime is, unless it has to do with military matters, of which the military police will actually do the arresting and then later hand over to the police.
But the interesting thing here again is the status quo issue. Alaji Martin will always insist that that was the status quo, that is the way it was happening, and it has to go that
It,
way.
it,
There's this point where he said that they were giving orders, or they are giving orders to carry on, or else they will also suffer the same fate. That is, if they don't execute those things, they also will end up, I mean, being in jail or being tortured, just like what they are doing to the other their fellow comrades.
Well, Hassan, I must say it is really unfortunate that he is actually basing his facts or defense on mere statements and not on something that is actually written, because we all know that is not what the law says, talk less of the international law, because every law is going in accordance with the international law. The international law says somebody cannot be actually forced to write a statement. It says somebody cannot be tortured to the point where they have no option but to confess. Because if you're to torture a person to some extent, they have no choice but to confess to what you want to hear.
Obviously, but there is another part that I would want you to give me your own side of, which is he said he is never happy with the orders that he's given. It is out of, I mean, no option. But again, he also, I mean, highlighted the fact that he made a mistake, though he didn't go much on that. But he also, I mean, gave this information that he wants the Gambians to forgive him. But many would be like, the way he is testifying, the apology was not a sincere apology.
Yeah, that because from let's talk from a natural point of view. When people say things from their hearts, it's easy to know. Not to say that he doesn't mean what he is saying, but then these are just natural observations. Also, on the fact that he didn't have any choice at that time, but to accept the orders that were given to him. I wouldn't buy that, and I am sure most Gambians, most intellectuals, most people who know the law wouldn't buy that too, because
But Fatimata,
because
yesterday there's this interesting part of Bunja Dabo at the subscript part of his testimony. He's highlighted something that is very very important, because we've seen a little, I mean, disagreement between him and the commissioner,
yeah.
where the commissioner didn't agree with him on the fact that the army should or Bunja Dabo as a person was morally obliged to take up weapons and trying to overthrow the current government, which he believed was, I mean, making tortures on its citizenry, killing, its people. But again, Bunja's point was, it doesn't just revolve around the army. I mean, every human being, every Gambian has that, moral obligation to do something about, I mean, making so, I mean, the government, sticks to the rule of law, which to him, every Gambian was very silent. I mean, they were not doing everything, sorry, anything, and nobody was talking about what Jame was doing. Everybody was quiet. We have intellectuals in the country. We have military people. We have
Exactly.
all aspects of, I mean, of life sector, but everybody was quiet. So that point also is something that many people are still debating on, because the fact that Alaji Martin, I mean, would stand and say, "Yeah, Jame, I'm not going to take that order," would be also very interesting to see.
No, not to say, not to actually say to Yaya Jammeh's face that I wouldn't do this, because we know if he didn't carry out, Yaya Jammeh had different people that dance to his tunes. It just, no matter what the tune is, but then it's just a matter of you decide after one incident, one might understand that it would be difficult to deny that first order. But when before a second time arises, you could actually set precedents as to how you can escape. We've seen people who did that. We've seen people who
That
actually
would be
left
very
the country.
interesting. That would be
We've
very
we've seen
interesting.
people who actually left the country just because they didn't want to go through, or they didn't want to impose their fellow Gambians to expose them to these human rights
But
violations.
the fact that people are exiling, it doesn't change the situation, because if at that juncture Alaji Martin is saying, "I'm not going to do this," then he's earning himself a ticket of exile, which if any Gambian does that at any point, you're earning yourself a ticket of exile.
Yeah, but then
So the case is, we will draw this to where Bunja Dabo was talking, because sometimes we have the normative and the empirical in life. This is how things should go, and this is how things are going. It's two different things. We have sometimes the Bunja's point was. They are just sticking to the normative. You cannot overthrow the constitution, but someone was overthrowing the constitution, and everybody was silent about it.
yeah.
So it's a critical point, which I think analysts, our political analysts, our experts in all areas should also. I
Yeah,
mean,
but Hassan, I think every person would be proud to be on exile based on the fact that you are actually doing it for a national interest, don't you think?
so if everybody goes to exile, who's going to run the country
It's
then?
not not everybody will be given orders by the president. I
Well,
know it will be hard for
okay.
you
Well,
to agree on that.
coming
Yeah.
back to some of his points. Let's just look at the nature of the panel, which these alleged,
Yeah.
coup plotters were put into. A panel of over 30 people. I mean, with an intimidating, I mean, atmosphere,
Yeah.
because we've seen where the lead counsel quoted from the Foraya newspaper, that was in 2007, where we have
Sanya.
Sanyang. I mean, giving his ordeal, how he was treated. I mean, and when he was taken to the panel, what happened, which Alaji Martin clearly said it is not true. In fact, I've not seen where Alaji Martin actually admitted.
Where his name was mentioned and he actually admitted.
Exactly.
You could see him confidently responding to most of the questions in the negative, and also calling some of the assertions as a lie or 100% lie. So that is interesting enough.
Yes, but the panel again is something that many believe that, I mean, to connect that to the current situation, it has to be discouraged. And then again, the fact that most of them were put in conditions, where at the end of the day they have to give information, like we've seen Sanyang. Initially he did not want to give information, but as the pain is more inflicted on him. He's a human being.
And also the atmosphere, because as he said, there was the police, there was senior military officers, and there was the junglers who were in black. Black alone
The
is so scary.
the famous
Yeah,
junglers.
black alone is so scary. So
I
imagine black couple, people dressed in black couple with all other officials. That must be very scary.
Well, the junglers, but we believe now they are no more existing. Because looking at the army for now, you would not, or everyone will agree that there is nothing like junglers. But the reformation that they are talking about still, needs to be, fast tracked, because it is just very sad to see a section of the army which is, in fact, not a section. The junglers are part of the army, but they're segregated, to serve a purpose that is not in the national interest. To serve a purpose that is just, there to consolidate the president and to instill fear in the people, because we know the junglers. Even looking at the Jani Commission, the way the monies were, looted, the way it is going, it is all because of the fear of the junglers. Because if you are instructed and you do not do what you are instructed, then the subsequent night, be rest assured that you're going to be collected and you are taken to where they're going to, do things that are
Exactly,
just
Al
very
Hassan, and
serious.
also this clearly, again, we've clearly seen how the NIA, which is the National Intelligence Agency, which was supposed to be responsible for the people, it is a state. It was supposed to be a state institution, not an institution that will be the ears or the eyes of a certain person who is the president. We've seen how the NIA has been used, to actually met tortures on people that it was actually supposed to protect, which is very pathetic, and which was the least expected of that particular institution. And also we've seen that the name has actually been changed to SIS, but we hope that it will not be just a change of name, but a change of institution. When I say institution, about how the institution operated before, everything about that institution should change from the name to the operation.
Well, exactly. Then I will just draw back to Bunja Dabo's, portion, where he was slapped, and he mentioned he was slapped, but Alaji Martin again is saying that was not true, and the lead council has to put it to him that, it is a place where, you have over 30 people, and then, he's still insisting that that is not fair. And again, Bunja Dabo himself, yesterday said, they should, remove or suspend all these top officials, or any military officer, in fact, who is still serving in the military, and he or she has been adversely mentioned, due to the fact that,
Has been mentioned.
yeah, his point is that, they are not just
Fit.
actually healthy, or it's not healthy for them to be in the military, but many will be. In fact, in the comments we've seen many people trying to say Alaji Martin should be, outrightly, suspended from the military till for the scrutiny, which is going to be very very interesting.
I think the right thing to suggest would be, for that is on my perception, would be to suspend all those that have been mentioned, just a suspension. But then dismissal can come after we've had concrete evidence as to whether they've actually, done some of these atrocities.
Well, exactly. But let's just look at where, this guy, Faring, where he was intimidated to to confess, just
Yeah,
to tell a
yeah,
lie,
yeah,
according to him,
yeah.
where people like Musa Jame, be like, if you don't, if you don't write a statement indicating that you were part of the coup, we will teach you how to do that. And that's where they introduced this, the shocking, the electric shocking, which I've never seen, but we all know, especially when we watch these movies and stuff like that, which is very very dangerous. If it is used on someone, at the end of the day, he or she cannot continue
Yeah, and,
receiving
and Al
that.
Hassan, I must say it was very shocking to hear Alaji Martin say that in a coup, when people are arrested, they must talk. They must. I think that was in the right, word to use. Must talk, because people can only talk if they know about something. But then, if you think torturing people, or meting out some certain kinds of tortures on them is what will make them talk, they would actually talk, but not voluntarily. And we know the law discourages involuntary statements.
Exactly, and on the same issue, we've seen the Babu Jaha's
Yeah,
case.
Babu Jaha also went through
Babu
the same
Jaha's
thing. Yeah,
ordeal was very, very, very
yeah,
short. Being a driver to Nur Cham, according to him, he did not know what was actually going on, but
yeah,
they were trying to, force him and saying that because of his proximity with,
yeah,
Nur Cham, he must know something.
yeah.
And evidently, at the end of the day, he was baselessly. In fact, even if he was part of the coup, I mean, one would say the due process did not follow. I mean, they did not use the right procedures. I mean, to take him to 10 years in jail.
Yeah, Al Hassan, and at this point, I think it is important that we note that Yahya Jammeh alone couldn't have, carried out all these atrocities in the country. Yahya Jammeh alone couldn't have taken this country into 22 years of hell. But because we had people around him also that didn't tell him the truth, the people that were not brave to tell him the truth, people that were dancing to his tunes based on their personal interests, people that were dancing to his tunes because of expectations of promotions and whatsoever. The country has gone through 22 years of dictatorship, 22 years of hell, which I think shouldn't repeat. I think when it comes to appointing people or having certain types of people around the president, it should be based on merits and not because they actually supporting the president. They actually support the president in whatever decision he takes. But then it should be based on merit. It should be based on expertise and so on.
Yeah, and that will take us to the in fact to question, I mean, the integrity of I mean, Gambians that are vested with certain responsibilities,
Yeah.
because sometimes we just direct it to the president. I
Yeah.
mean, we're forgetting that as ordinary people,
We also have a
we also have
responsibility.
a huge chunk of responsibility to do,
Yeah.
because the fact that Yahya Jammeh was surrounded with people that are not giving him the right advice.
Yeah.
I mean, can go back to any other government.
Yeah, because you look at the purpose of the TRC itself. Because if Yahya Jammeh was the only one in responsible for these atrocities, then we wouldn't have had a special commission to look into the matter. Then it was just going to be a commission working in relation with the international community, arrest Yahya Jammeh, bring him back, question him, and take him through the law. But then because the TRC knows that he alone did not commit these atrocities, and that some other people too had a responsibility which they failed to play, so or act upon. So they're bound to be questioned or brought to before the TRRC too.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that would also come the area that I was just trying to dilate on. In fact, currently, I mean, we've seen the TRRC's
Yeah.
slogan is never again,
Never again.
and the never again should be a process that has to start. I mean, as we are investigating, and the contemporary also
Yeah.
should correspond to that never again.
Yeah.
As we've seen, even today on papers, and so we've seen where I mean, people are trying to throw certain words to the in fact to the current government, saying that it should actually surround itself with, I mean, the right people, especially Barrow himself, should try to get the right advices, because we've just I just want to connect this, because
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a reality that just occurred
Mhm.
when Henry Gomez spoke, and is a special advisor to the president.
Yeah.
Many, I mean, concerned Gambians believe that even if what he was saying is the fact, the manner in which he said it was not something that is, I mean, pleasant. It is something that would not, really get down to, to the Gambian people, which many people are trying to discourage. Others, in fact, are saying, I mean, Barrow should even go for better
Yeah.
advices.
Yeah.
So, which is very, very vital.
Yeah.
He should make sure what really occurred during Jammeh's time
Yeah.
don't repeat itself,
Yeah.
because being an individual is very difficult to control a whole nation,
Yeah.
especially looking at the Gambia. So you need the right people with the right knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, to put you through, so as to attain the actual objectives, as far as, I mean, the national interest is concerned.
Also, Al Hassan, with the hearings, you could detect a virus that was ongoing in the military, especially, or let's say in the security force. It's like there was the people who were supposed to be the first people to have a proper knowledge of the law didn't have that knowledge. That is the fact here. Like, let's say, you could see even some of these senior military officers had little knowledge about the law. So which is
I mean, in fact, we can see that from today's testimony.
through his testimony, exactly,
yeah,
as he
we
was trying
understand.
to defend himself, unknowingly he is implicating himself, if you're following well.
In fact, it is, we had sometimes we have to differentiate I mean, the actual ignorance.
Yeah.
You know, at times you might go through the formal process of
Yeah.
learning something,
Yeah.
but you don't even know the actual content of it.
Exactly.
Because even in the case of Sana Sabali, we've seen the issue of the Geneva Convention.
Yeah.
I mean, the only time he was trying to value it was
When he
when
was addressed by the,
the,
yeah,
the chairman,
yeah,
when the chairman was when he showed his dissatisfaction on
on
the fact
how,
that he's one of those that really advocates for
yeah,
that thing. I mean,
the
the
Geneva
Geneva
Convention.
Convention, seeing it from his own country.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the time Sanas tried to reshape his, I mean,
Yeah.
whole concept of
Yeah.
the Geneva Convention, trying
Yeah.
to defend it.
Yeah.
But the fact is that, I mean, most of them are even ignorant of these basic, I mean, things,
Yeah.
which is fundamental as far as security is concerned.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that is true. Another interesting part is where Alaji Martin. I heard him say several times that at the time he was young, but then if you've listened from the
Which
beginning
many
from.
soldiers will use as a scapegoat.
Yes, I was young, but then if you listen from the beginning of his testimony, he was born in 1964. But then from 1964 to the point where these some of these atrocities were actually committed, he was over 30.
Yeah,
So
yeah, especially 95, then we might be
he
around
was over
31.
30. So
Yeah.
can we agree with him that at that point of time he was young and he wasn't thinking straight? Those are things that are very hard to
Yeah,
really.
he might be young, but not young enough not to take up
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
the right decisions, because 30, 31, 32 or above, is a reasonable age to be able to
Reason
take
well.
decisions that are very, very, I mean, normal and in line with any protocol.
Yeah. Al Hassan, I think we would end the discussion on the TRC for now and go on with our news briefing. Good afternoon, Avi. Good afternoon, our viewers in the African continent and beyond. You're watching the headlines this hour on iAfrica TV, and I am Fatmata Jaju. The most adversely mentioned General Martin testifies today. The most adversely named torturer in the Jammeh's 22 years regime, General Alaji Martin, testifies before the TRRC today's public hearing in connection to his involvement in the 1994 coup and alleged participation in several inhuman tortures of the detainees at the central prison in Mile 2. Evidence has suggested Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, including some senior Saudi officials, are liable for the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, according to the UN rights investigator Agnes Kalamat. The UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions called for countries to widen sanctions to include Crown Prince and his pastoral assets until and unless he can prove he has no responsibility. Khashoggi, a critic of the prince and a Washington Post columnist, was last seen at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2nd, where he was to receive papers ahead of his wedding. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres also describes the killing of Jamal Khashoggi as horrendous crime, according to a UN spokesperson.
The Secretary General, as we've been saying, does not have the power or the authority to launch criminal investigations without a mandate from a competent intergovernmental body. Power and authority to do that lies with member states. If a full and effective criminal investigation is not conducted by member states, the only way to effectively pursue an investigation requiring the cooperation of relevant member states would be through a resolution of the Security Council under the appropriate charter provisions, and all member states should cooperate with those efforts.
Carried out by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
The report was conducted by a special rapporteur who, as you know, and we've said often, are independent of the Secretary General. They are appointed by the Human Rights Council. It's not for the Secretary General to agree or not agree with what the special rapporteur reports. There are a couple of recommendations aimed at the Secretary General, as there are recommendations to the Security Council, to individual member states, and I think it's everyone's responsibility to study those recommendations.
Mandate from
A Kenyan court has convicted 3 people of terrorism-related offenses for helping the East African terrorist group who carried out an attack on a university that killed 148 people, most of them students, in 2015. The Garissa University attack is said to be the worst such attack in the East African state since Al-Shabaab bombed the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998, killing 258 people. China's President Xi Jinping arrived in Pyongyang for a summit amid a holding out of the prospect of fresh measures to support North Korea's floundering, sanctions-bound economy. The visit comes as tensions flare once again between Washington and Pyongyang over Trump's efforts to get North Korea to ditch its nuclear weapons. This visit of the Chinese president is said to be the first trip in 14 years by a Chinese leader. Well, viewers, that's all we have for you on the news headlines. Please stay tuned. We would be resuming in 25 minutes on the TRRC hearing.
Banyo lang adem. Terminal masa garas bukan dulu.